And welcome back to Voices of Santa Barbara. I am your host today. Every Wednesday we do Voices of Santa Barbara, and we alternate hosts. We try to get a good crew going here. Thank you for spending some time with us today. Do appreciate it. Today we have a wonderful turn in our program lineup. Normally we do a bunch of people who have ideas. Today we have a fine artist, a longtime resident of Santa Barbara, and she is an outstanding watercolorist. I think that's the proper expression for it. I never really knew. Her name is Marianna Victoria Mashek. Many of you know her because she's had many exhibits here in Santa Barbara, and I happened to go to one of her exhibits at the invitation of Ned and Tony Bixby. I have to mention them. I'm sure they're listening out there, along with a lot of other of Marianna's friends. And what really impresses me about Marianna is she blends whimsical watercolor with serious concepts. Now, that's very unusual. I love talking to artists because, as Sister Gretchen once told me in high school when I asked her what an artist was, and Sister Gretchen said to me, an artist is a person that can thrill a room full of people. Now, I went to one of Marianna's recent exhibits at the hospice, Santa Barbara Hospice, again at the invitation of the Bixbys. And I walked into this room, and I was thrilled by what I saw. So I said to myself, whoa, you are in the presence of a real artist. Marianna, welcome to Voices of Santa Barbara. How's that for an introduction?
Oh, beautiful. Thank you, Mark. That's so great.
Good to have you here.
Thank you. It's so good to be here.
You were born in Santa Barbara, right?
I was, yes.
Well. So you've been here a little longer than I have. First of all, I'd like you to talk about how you began to become interested in watercolor painting, because it's such a rarity these days. At least I'm probably artistically illiterate to begin with, so I don't get to see many watercolors. But when I was in grammar school, my favorite class during the day, we had it once a week, we could paint. And while everybody else was fiddling around with crayons and acrylics and oils, I asked the teacher if I could experiment with watercolors. And you know what I was fascinated by? The fact is that it was alive. The colors in the water would go where they wanted to go, whether you wanted them to go there or not.
Exactly.
How did you get involved in that?
Well, first of all, my parents came from Europe to Santa Barbara the year before I was born, and that they were absolutely sure that this is the city they wanted to live in. My mother was comparing Santa Barbara to where they lived in Yugoslavia, specifically Dubrovnik, which is a very beautiful city with the mountains and the sea, and of course fortresses there, but she loved the beauty of Santa Barbara, and being a trained artist through the Royal School of Art in Belgrade in Yugoslavia, and her background being in the arts. She was a perfect model for me in that she taught me as a small girl. She would set up still lifes and taught me proportion and perspective and drawing and, of course, watercolor. So I wasn't afraid of watercolor. And in fact, I love to use exactly what you're talking about it having a life of its own, as what I call auspicious accidents.
Yeah, you know what? When we were chatting at the exhibit, you mentioned that. You pointed out to certain parts of your paintings where you said, oh, well, you see that dark ocean there? And I'd say, yeah. She'd say, oh, that was an auspicious accident.
And I'm intrigued by it, and I can go back, if I really allow my perfectionist side to go back and try to control it, it might really make it very awkward and not very fun to look at.
Yeah.
And so I enjoy the process.
Yeah.
And I do have serious topics, but the medium is so beautiful, and I really enjoy it. So my mother brought it into my life. I did study in Santa Barbara all the way. I went through the Santa Barbara City schools, public schools, and had great art teachers in high school, and then also directly into UCSB, and was fortunate enough to work with William Dole in drawing. Howard Warshaw was a great painter, and art history, Alfred Moyer, Mario Del Chiaro, this is European art, and Prudence Meyer in Eastern art. And so I loved the topics, and it filled me with a lot of content, and a lot of areas that I want to explore.
At what point, Marianna, at what point did you discover, writers have to struggle to find what's called their voice. And it took me years. I mean, it took me a long time to, I'd keep reading, and I would try to write, and of course, nothing. It was horrible. It's just despicable. It's just garbage. And my teacher would say, yeah, this is just garbage, Mark. Stop this. This is good. But eventually I did find a voice. What is it like? Is there a similarity with respect to fine artists? Is there a point at which psychologically you said, aha, this is Marianna Mashek?
I think it really goes back to my desire to tell stories. And that could be the literal interpretation. You may have seen a small piece that's a Russian winter, a small piece that was in the show, a Russian winter, and it's decorated with borders. And within those borders are scenes of Russia. And that's a very typical style that was developed by Bilibin, Russian illustrator of fairy tales. And so when I first, I was working full time and very busy with family, etc. But when I first started to do my own personal work, it was to illustrate stories for my family. And it evolved into a kind of a looser, less of a framework. And so you're a storyteller, and because we're gonna, we got about 2 minutes in this segment, but when we turn around after the break, I'm going to ask you to fill in the background of your mother, Galina. Yes.
Because I see such great heritage between your mom and you, and she has an equally fascinating story to match yours. So I just wanted to let the audience know that we're going to be coming up for a break pretty soon. But please stay tuned, because this particular story that you're going to hear is it's chilling in its histrionics and the chronology of the world between World War I and World War II, where your mother actually had to leave Russia and go to Yugoslavia and start her training as an iconographer. I think, is that the word, iconographer? Somebody who paints icons?
She painted icons as well as painting portraits and still lifes.
Yeah, but I love icons. I love icons. I was so happy to see a couple of them on the wall when
Saint Sophia and the Resurrection are in the show.
Yes. And there are also some fascinating stories about where some of those icons are in Santa Barbara, which we will tell you if you stay tuned to KZSB AM 1290 with Mark McIntire. We'll be right back. And we're back right here on Voices of Santa Barbara with Mark McIntire as your host for today. And in studio, we're very privileged to have a fine artist, a watercolorist, by the way, Marianna Victoria Mashek. And before the break, we were teasing you about telling the story about her mother, who has a fascinating story. And in this segment, we're going to finish that conversation, and then we're going to go into the influences of the artists upon our guest today, Marianna Mashek. Welcome back, Marianna.
Oh, thank you.
Give us a thumbnail sketch of your mother's chronology, starting in Russia.
Okay.
And about the time.
My mother was born in southern Russia. Her father was a military engineer for the Tsar Nicholas II, and traveled around Russia to build military academies and etc. Her mother was a wonderful pianist and sculptress, so there was a lot of art in the background. They had an estate near Odessa, and my mother was born there, and it was, I think, very similar to the Tolstoy's estate, Lazavatka. And during the Bolshevik Revolution, when she was probably 10 or 11, her father did not return. He was killed. And basically the men in the family were killed by the Bolsheviks, and the women literally took the family icons and jewelry and left first for Constantinople, is what she would say. We went to Constantinople and then took the train to Yugoslavia. My mother went to a boarding school of daughters of white Russian officers only.
Right, and now for those who don't remember what White Russian means, it's those who supported the monarchy, those who supported the Tsar. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
Okay.
It was she did not live in Soviet Russia.
Right. So White Russians were very unpopular after the Bolsheviks took over. Correct.
Yeah, the estates
they were hunted down and killed.
Seized,
They were hunted down and killed.
She actually remembers flames being
Oh my God.
around surrounding the estate. So it was horrific, and she did get to this wonderful school where the girls were raised to be amazing professionals. I mean, my mother spoke 6 languages.
Wow.
And there were chemists and actresses, and my mother was the artist and went on to go to the Royal School of Art in Yugoslavia.
But then more monsters beset
more
your
war.
family. More war.
That's more war.
The Nazis.
And, that correct. And they were in refugee camps. My father was my mother's second husband. And they actually had to be in Germany in a couple of refugee camps. I had the opportunity this last May to go to Vienna and actually research, through the help of a researcher, where my parents' wood apartments they lived in during World War II was being bombed at the time. And I had the opportunity to actually locate the buildings.
Was it still standing?
Some of them, yeah.
Wow.
They had to move around. And they received, to cut it short, 2 visas came up for the United States through some contacts in Cleveland, Ohio, some Americans. My father was a professional, a veterinarian, actually, my mother, the artist. My grandmother and her then husband went to Argentina, to a community of Russians there that were also emigres. So they emigrated first to New York, then to Ohio. My mother painted portraits of important people, and I think they stayed at the farm of Louis Braunfeld, of the writer. And they made these contacts and came to Santa Barbara without money, not speaking the language.
We all come to Santa Barbara without money.
And started fresh. And then I was born, voila, at St. Francis Hospital.
Wonderful, wonderful story. How did your mother get involved in painting icons? Do you recall that, or is that?
My mother was a devout, had
Russian Orthodox.
Incredible faith.
Ah.
And she Russian Orthodox and really loved the church, brought me as a small child to the traditional Russian Orthodox services, which I remember as being very long, and especially the Easter. You'd get up at midnight and go to church, and then...
Are there any Russian Orthodox churches here in Santa Barbara? I don't really
yes. There is one on Castillo Street, and I think it's Victoria. And then right up the block is a chapel.
That's what you were talking about.
Yeah, not very recognizable as a church, although it does have the Russian Orthodox cross above the door.
I'm going to check this out.
Yeah, and there were caretakers that actually maintained the chapel, and there are some icons that my mother painted. But my mother really loved St. Michael, St. George and the Dragon, and
the Resurrection?
The Resurrection, which is in the current My Show, and then the Saint Sophia that's in the show as well.
There's something very chilling about Russian iconography, as there is with Greek iconography and Armenian. There's also an Armenian iconography. One of my students is Armenian, and he introduced me to Alex Madashian, and he introduced me to the whole Armenian culture. It's incredible how closely the Russian and the Armenian and the Greek Christian experience happens to be. Thank you for bringing that up to speed, because I see a great deal of influence between the works your mother did and certainly the works that you're doing in terms of, an icon is telling a story. A religious story, or a religious with religious content, but you are an artist that has a content, a very serious content, but it's done in a sort of I guess I have to use the word that many of the writers who have described you use: wistful. Now, some of the people who influenced your writing. Who are those people? Who are some of the people that your artwork? Who are some of the great artists that influenced you?
In a nutshell, when you asked me the question about the success of my art when we were talking, what I'm trying to do from who I am, my voice, is to connect others with emotions and their psyche, and the shared human experiences of grief, romance, disappointment, as you said, longing, joy, delight, and whimsy. And so some of my paintings will be kind of a tongue-in-cheek, almost like a whimsical, like a not quite a joke, but just a kind of a delight. And so I experience that as I'm painting.
Yeah.
And all I can say is, I talked about the Russian fairy tales, but which brings me to an area which I believe is in literature quite. But also in visual art, and that's called magic realism.
Magic realism. I've never heard that. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, I think it was in Latin literature.
See, I should have. I have spent 18 years studying Latin, and I have never encountered that.
Well, I mean, in the Latin countries.
Oh, I see, the Latin cultures.
Spanish,
yes, I see. Okay,
and,
gotcha.
So, would you like to know which artist?
You know what? We got about a minute.
I can come back.
Yeah, we're going to come back to this because we have another minute.
I would say that what inspires me is, number one, beauty. In my life, I want to be inspired by beauty because it's so uplifting, as well as shared human experience. The stories and the richness of the human experience, the connection between people. I'm intrigued by transformation. How does that happen?
Oh, okay.
Grace, ease, and joy, to bring that into my artwork, and to convey emotion that touches others, such as my painting that's at the Ridley Tree Cancer Center that women see when they go in for radiology, and the poem that's about, she let go. And those patients are able to delight for a moment in actually feeling of letting go. And
you're talking my language now, and we're going to pick this up on the other side of the break about transcendence and how transcendence figures into all of your work. I am Mark McIntire. This is Voices of Santa Barbara. Stay with us. We're here with Marianna Mashek. Be right back. Okay, and we're back after our raucous break here. You should be in the, all you folks should be on AM 1290 because the really interesting parts are actually during the break. Not that the content isn't interesting, but some of the craziest stuff happens during the break. We were talking about Dr. Dugan's truck having frost covered at 28 degrees this morning. I hope you're all enjoying the Boston-like weather that we're having here during the week. We had enough of the rain since last week. Anyway, back to our guest, Marianna Mashek. Marianna Victoria Mashek is a beautiful name and a beautiful person, and she paints beautiful paintings. And as we discussed in the first two segments, her paintings actually depict very deep emotions that are accessible through her work. I think that's probably what really impressed me the most, Marianna, is when I walked into the room of your exhibit, I immediately saw what you were doing. I mean, I immediately saw, first of all, it was housed at the hospice, and I immediately went over to the painting you were talking about before the break, which is Letting Go, and how magical that. I know that's in the Ridley Cancer Treatment Center, and women who are going in for treatment, they see this painting along with the poem, and they, as you just said before we took the break, they for the first time can really connect with the experience of letting go by seeing the painting, by looking at what you have done.
And the poem.
And the poem, yeah. Sit a little closer to the mic. I'm make sure we get you.
Yeah.
So we were talking about influences on your work, and I don't think you quite finished that because I'd like you to finish those influences. They're very important.
Okay. So, being that what inspires me, that I spoke about beauty and being able to share the richness of human experience and connection between people, I think about artists in aesthetically that were able to really influence me and inspire me. And I go back to the actually the English pre-Raphaelites when you talk about wistful and imagery. Those very formal, but John William Waterhouse, Edmund Dulac, a French-British illustrator that illustrated fairy tales. They're just elegant and beautiful and yet convey a lot of feeling. I was in the Czech Republic, Austria, and Bavaria in May, and I certainly enjoyed Alphonse Mucha and his illustration and his murals in Czech Republic, Gustav Klimt, and then coming from Klimt, a student of his was Egon Schiele, an Austrian as well, that went into expressionism, from symbolism to expressionism. And then someone that really stands out that brings in, he was influenced by Hinduism and Buddhism as well, is Odilon Redon. Beautiful.
You have beautiful French,
beautiful. Thank you. I'm going to Paris in May, so I hope I use it. So Odilon Redon, just mystical. You would very much enjoy his work, Mark. Very mystical, and really speaks to, in a ethereal kind of a way, the soul. Then Russian illustrations of Ivan Bilibin, the paintings of Ilya Repin, which has to do with the history of Russia, a lot about the physical and spiritual life of the people, some of which is tragic.
Oh.
Ivan murdering his son and things like that. I saw
Wow.
that. I
Wow.
was in Moscow
Wow.
at the Tretyakov Gallery and saw some of these historical things depicting just the revolution and war.
Horrific.
But just beautiful artwork.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nicholas Roerich, another Russian that had experienced India and the Himalayas, etc. A lot of mysticism, very beautiful work, some of which were watercolors. And then I love the playfulness, but the storytelling of Marc Chagall. Which,
Now, him I've heard about.
yes, Russian French,
Yeah.
which incorporates symbolism.
Yes.
Cubism and Fauvism actually came in. But, I love that kind of playfulness, but a lot of it is emotional. Konrad Magi was an Estonian, and it's also the influence of Impressionism and Fauvism.
I was about to ask you about Impressionism, because it seems to me that when I look at it, when I look at a Monet, I see elements of you. I see.
Well, thank you.
I see
My goodness.
Yeah,
That's
because it's
quite an honor.
It's not the exactitude of replication; it's the inspiration of emotion.
Yes. Of course, Van Gogh and Gauguin for post-impressionism, and then I have not acknowledged the women artists, and this is a Russian, Zinaida Yevgenina Serebryankova. Amazing portraits of children, of people, so beautiful. Eleanor Abbott, an English illustrator. Frida Kahlo.
I've heard of her. Yeah.
Georgia O'Keeffe.
Oh, she's one of my favorite all time. Her eyes, what she does with children's eyes. If you've never seen a Georgia O'Keeffe painting, folks out there, please Google it. Google Georgia O'Keeffe, please do
And
that.
the French Impressionists, women, Mary Cassatt and Berthe Morisot, which was also children and mothers and very lovely, unfortunately, domestic life, but that's what their world was involved with.
Yeah.
And then there's modern magic realism of Christian Scholle, Katrin Weltstein, and Andrea Couch. Now, those are modern magic. I call them magic realists because they're very surreal pieces, very interesting, and really tell a lot of story. So when I see all these artists, I'm so inspired. I just can't wait to do my next piece.
There is a school of philosophy which I happen to subscribe to, which there's a French philosopher, Merleau-Ponty, and he believes that reality, truth, and goodness, which are three of the four basic questions in philosophy, that reality, truth, and goodness are really accessible through beauty.
How wonderful.
Yeah,
I've
and
always felt that.
Yeah, and you don't hear too much about this today, but what you do, and I was first turned on to this really by studying Salvatore Dali. Interestingly enough, what he could do with landscaping and Hieronymus Bosch.
Wow.
Okay, if you haven't seen a Hieronymus Bosch painting, I was stunned. I couldn't take my eyes off of it. And that goes back to what Sister Gretchen was telling me, that a real artist is somebody who can thrill you and thrill a room full of people.
That's beautiful.
So I see in you that your philosophical outlook is through the aesthetic, rather than through the logical or the ethical or the metaphysical. Your pathway is, like so many of our contemporaries, is actually through the footbridge. I call it the footbridge of aestheticism. It was Plato, actually, who said that mathematics and art are a higher revelation than philosophy. Something to
Wow.
think about. You know, we've got, what, 2 more segments to go, I think, here. This is going by pretty quickly. Please stay with us. We're going to take our break a little bit early. I want to give Marianna Mashek some time to reflect and project about where her career is going and what she's trying to accomplish. I think she should be teaching magic realism someplace, okay? So all you college presidents who are my fans, who are listening to me, I want you to hire this lady right away. Anyway, we'll be right back after these messages right here on KZSB. And we're back once again with our 4th segment here. We only have 5 segments, so glad you could be with us. We're having a great conversation with a fine artist, not only a fine artist, but an intuitively brilliant artist, Marianna Victoria Mashek, a long time, well, she was born here in Santa Barbara, and her mother actually passed away at the hospice here in Santa Barbara. And I'd like Marianna to have you tell us the connection between your work as a therapy for those who are facing illnesses or facing, the last things in life.
Well, yeah, the show, I actually curated a show of my mother's work 8 years ago. She's passed away 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And
She was
so
94?
She was 94.
Wow.
And so this show was really kind of a juxtaposition, if that's the correct word, of mother and daughter of 2 different styles. And so that's why the show is important. But also in the reason, raison d'être, of is hospice and also the Dream Foundation were able to help my mom in the last year. Well, was it prior to her passing at 94, where my mother had a wish, and that would be to be blessed at the Russian church in Santa Barbara by a priest. And at the time, there were not many priests available at the church. I'm not sure why, but so they got together and paid for a priest to come from Father Michael, actually from Los Angeles, to do a blessing of my mother at the church, and paid for Easy Lift to bring her from the convalescent home. And much to her surprise, there was a big red fire engine out in front with firemen to take her up, to hold the wheelchair and literally take it up. Obviously, it was not wheelchair accessible. Up the steps to the church for a blessing. And this was similar to a communion, but there was a beautiful ceremony, very sacred, with a picture of her at age 3 and her parents and a blessing. And then another fire truck came with more firemen, got her down the steps, and she did get to visit the 2, several, well, I want to say 2, but there may have been more icons across the street at the chapel. And so it was a really very special thing. It was in the news press, and a big article about that. And so I was able to thank Hospice and the Dream Foundation there at the opening ceremony of opening reception of my show, again, for this blessing. And
what's so refreshing to me about what you have been doing and about what your mother has done is the fact that in today's society, tending towards the transcendent is not a very popular idea. As a matter of fact, there are people who mock it and ridicule it and despise it, actually. And I think that this what you're doing is you're helping us to restore what has always been part of Western civilization, and that is the fascination with the concept of beauty and how beauty uplifts us from tragedy, from suffering, from disease, from even death itself. And that's not a very popular idea because we seem to be so preoccupied with gadgets and gizmos, with cell phones and internet sites and podcasts. And I'm as guilty as the rest. Here I am, as a broadcaster. I'm guilty of all that business. But when I see works like yours, when I see works of the same topics that you do, it always makes me realize that there's something far more in life than materiality, and that this world that we inhabit as temporary occupants of this world, it's a rehearsal. It's a rehearsal for the next step that we're going to take. We all must pass away. We all must do that. The law of entropy, as Dr. Shermer likes to say, my friend, I interviewed him yesterday. He's a great believer in the fact that the second law of thermodynamics means that we're born to die. But while we're here, why don't we spend more time thinking about the transcendent? I call them realities. And when I look at your paintings, Marianna, I see reality. I see things that are real. Especially those works of yours, and I'm going to be showing the works when we upload the MP3 of this program to my Voices of Santa Barbara webpage, which I'll give you the link to, so your friends can see it. Those who haven't seen your work, I'm going to be showing 3 videos that I took at the exhibition, along with all of your paintings. What is your favorite painting that inspires Marianna?
Oh, I love them all, really. I mean, I use the painting "Breaking Away" as my Facebook icon, actually, and a very lovely woman bought that for her. A giclée print, big print of that for her living room, and it looks stunning. She has a very kind of a oceany feel of white and some aqua and seashells.
You like working in blue and white a lot, don't you?
Yeah.
Very Moroccan. She's actually wearing a blue and white a gown today, which is quite beautiful.
Yeah. Well, you asked me what my plans are for the future.
Well, no, we're going to get to that.
Okay.
What is when all of us get a little depressed now and then, all of us get a little down on the dumps. All of us need a little pickup. What painting do you go to that you have done that uplifts your own spirit when things are down?
Well, right now I'm very much in love with my painting "Poised for Courage," which is a woman next to the statue of the horse with wings on the top of the Paris Opera
Paris
building.
Opera House, yeah.
And there's twilight, and I love the colors, and I'm going to Paris in May, so I'm very excited.
Why are you going to Paris? Why?
I'm going to sketch and to do some artwork and just to take
Get
my
ideas,
time.
good little sketchbook work
just-
going there. Okay.
Just to take my time.
Yeah.
Yeah, while I'm on this planet, as
Right.
you say.
Oh, you've been to Montmartre, I'm sure, right? You've been to various. Paris has so many. It has so many elegant places to get inspired.
Yes.
Well, I must say that my French is so bad that when I went over to do an Arrow shirt commercial as President John F. Kennedy, the producers of the show refused to allow me to speak French. My French is so bad, they hired a young man with his girlfriend to drive me around and interface between me and the Parisians, because they said, riots will break out. Riots will break out. So we're going to take our final break here now, folks, and when we come back, Marianna Victoria Mashek is going to be telling us what the future looks like. What is her legacy going to be? We'll be right back. Yes, and we're back. I'm Mark McIntire, your host for this segment of Voices of Santa Barbara. And looking at the clock here, we're about to wrap up our wonderful conversation. Very stimulating, at least for me anyway. I find so much of a similarity and a kinship with Marianna Mashek because she's an artist who understands the value of transcendence in art and how art can lift us up out of the materialistic and Bolshevik slime that seems to surround everything. I know, I speak frankly. In any case, this is your segment now. I'm going to shut up. What is the future going to look like for Marianna?
Oh, gosh, this is wonderful. I feel like I'm creating or manifesting what's really going to happen. So
yes, go for it.
I really, really want to create new, brilliant, inspired artwork.
Mm-hmm.
I want to discover new business opportunities for illustration and design and to make fabulous contacts worldwide, to travel in Europe and actually sell my artwork internationally, to continue to have outstanding exhibits. I will have this show at Hospice is there at Hospice of Santa Barbara.
It's still there?
Yeah, until April.
Oh, get over there, folks. Get over there.
And it is Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. So you can even call to see, if it's busy up there or whatever, but please visit. And in July and August, I'll be showing at the Santa Barbara Tennis Club. The whole gallery space will be my work. And I do see that I will have new pieces, very inspired pieces.
Oh, good.
I want to establish a business network in Santa Barbara to develop work for sketches and illustrations for fashion, food, garden, whimsy, children, celebration, for a variety of different things, labels, brochures, books, to develop a career as a successful paid artist. And that involves talk about concepts, empowerment, happiness, and abundance. What I would like, when you talked about personal life legacy, is to develop my own unique gift and cultural heritage in my art. My own, as you said, my own voice. Where does that come from? What is my background? What is it what calls to me? And how do I translate that so that others can read it? To have touched and moved others with my art, and to inspire others to delight, as you said, in beauty, romance, freedom, and the fulfillment of their own dreams. To reach and touch emotion. And to also, speaking of Santa Barbara as a community, to respect other artists and what they do, and to build a relationship with other artists where they would refer to me as that perfect artist, that unique artist that tells a beautiful visual story. And that involves a kind of a co-creation in the community, a shared success. And
yeah, let's go for it.
Okay, so on my statement as an artist, my artist statement, I have a quote from Martha Graham in a letter to Agnes DeMille. There is a vitality, a life force, an energy, a quickening that is translated through into action. And because there is only one of you in all of time, this expression is unique. And if you block it, it will never exist through any medium and will be lost. The world will not have it. It is not your business to determine how good it is, nor how valuable, nor how it compares with other expressions. It is your business to keep it yours, clearly and directly to keep the channel open. And that's Martha Graham in a letter to Agnes DeMille.
Wonderfully stated. Where can we buy your paintings? Do you have a website?
Yes, I do.
And
it's
it is
MariannaVictoriaMashek.com. And you can contact me, and please see my artwork at Hospice.
Yes, and
the
if you don't know
tennis
where
club.
Hospice is, it's up by the Riviera Theater.
Behind.
Near the
yeah.
El Encanto Hotel. It's behind there.
yes.
And I want to thank you for being on the show. I really have learned a lot, especially about magical realism, and you should be teaching it. And I want to be your pupil. I want to sit in your class, okay? Thank you so much, Marianna.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll see you all later. Bye-bye.